Now let's get a GOP response from the top Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman Michael McCaul. Thanks for joining us this morning, Congressman. In response to the president's speech, you immediately tweeted that attacking half of America will only further divide our country. When you look at those polls showing 60 to 70% of Republicans believe Joe Biden is not the legitimate president, what is Biden supposed to do when the country cannot even decide what democracy means?
Well, look, I mean, democracy is messy, but it's better than all the other forms of government. I think that if this was a speech to unify the American people, it had just the opposite effect. It basically condemned all Republicans who supported Donald Trump in the last election. That's over 70 million people. And, you know, saying that Republicans are a threat to democracy is really a slap in the face. And you know my vote on certification and my position on that. I took an oath to the Constitution. But having said that, you don't come out to unify the nation. This was not a presidential address, by the way. It was a political speech that wasn't even carried by your network or the other two major networks because it was so political. It was a campaign speech before the midterm elections, and that's basically how I see it.
And how much should Donald Trump be blamed for the division in this country? You heard him say last night Biden is an enemy of the state. He has called the left-wing fascists in the past.
We know the rhetoric on both sides has been heightened. I don't think, you know, people in mainstream America particularly like, you know, the divisive rhetoric. I think, you know, I wish the president could have been more like Abraham Lincoln, who really did. He did not condemn the Democrats in the South in that time. He actually brought them into the tent. And I think that would be the mission I would advise for the president. I think he failed to do that in this speech that he gave.
So let's talk about the investigation. Last night, Donald Trump called the investigation into classified material stored at his house shameful, a travesty of justice, saying the FBI and Department of Justice have become, as he said, vicious monsters. Your reaction to that?
Well, look, I think there's a legal side of this. I was a former federal prosecutor, and there's the perception in the optics. I think the perception is what a lot of Republicans I know see on the heels of the Russian investigation, the Steele dossier. There's a certain distrust but verify attitude when it comes to the Department of Justice and the FBI, and it frankly saddens me because as an alumni of DOJ, I hate to see people's faith in our institutions being weakened. I have a lot of questions. Why didn't they enforce the subpoena before they did this unprecedented search warrant on a former president of the United States? This will all obviously come out factually as this case moves forward.
Do you see any reason that he should have taken those documents, those classified, highly classified documents, to Mar-a-Lago?
Well, look, I have lived in the classified world most of my professional career. I personally wouldn't do that, but I'm not the president of the United States. He has a different set of rules that apply to him. The president can declassify a document on a moment's notice, and we don't have all the facts. I know they were taken out of the White House while he was president, and whether or not he declassified those documents remains to be seen. He says he did. I don't have all the facts there.
Bill Barr basically said if he stood over documents and said these are all declassified, it's an absurd idea. You think that's what happened?
There is a process for declassification, but again, the president's in a very different position than most of us in the national security space. And if this was such a national security threat, for God's sakes, why didn't they brief the Gang of Eight on this? You know, the relevant committees on the Hill have asked for briefings on this to find out what was so important here from a national security standpoint that would merit such an extreme measure to have a search warrant on a former president of the United States.
Okay, I want to turn to foreign affairs here. You are on the Foreign Affairs Committee, the top Republican, and the war in Ukraine. The Biden administration is asking Congress for nearly $14 billion more in aid of the war effort. Is that something you could support?
I support Ukraine, and we need to support these freedom fighters who have really amazed the world and inspired the world for freedom and democracy against a brutal dictator, and that is Vladimir Putin. Going back to your first question, you know, Republicans aren't a threat to our democracy. I see the threat to our democracy being Putin, President Xi, Chairman Xi in China, the Ayatollah in Iran, who he's currently negotiating with to have an Iran deal, and Kim Jong-un of North Korea. Those are the major threats to democracy. But with respect to Ukraine, Congress will review this package. It's about $11 billion. As you know, we appropriate a $40 billion package. We want to make sure we got the right weapons going in. But also, Martha, you know, my view, we should have done this a year ago, well before the invasion, and given the Ukraine people the weapons they need to win this fight, which they are. They have a counteroffensive now in Kherson going into Crimea. So, you know, the weapons need to go in. They should have gone in a long time ago.
Very quickly, if you will, and you mentioned Iran. Would you support a military strike on Iran's nuclear facilities if they got close to building a bomb?
I think only as a last resort, but I do think instead of, you know, I met with the IAEA's Director General in Vienna. He said there are 3 undisclosed sites that they didn't report that have uranium. That means they're in complete violation of this agreement. You can't trust them. I would say, if I were president for the day, that, you know, a nuclear Iran is not acceptable. That is the policy of the United States. And now they will understand what that means. But we also have to get our coalition partners and our allies behind that. I would only, that's only warranted, and I've been briefed on the plan, by the way, that's only warranted as a last option only. But it has to be an option on the table that the Ayatollah understands.
Okay, thanks very much for joining us this morning.